Okay, welcome to the second session of Vergence. Uh, so Vergence, just to quickly reprise what the game is a dimensional fantasy game. It's inspired by all sorts of sources like Kill 6 Billion Demons, the Myst video game, the Chronicles of Amber. I'm actually wearing an Amber quote T-shirt at the moment, which seems appropriate. Uh, and we have characters who are able to travel across an infinite multiverse called the Umbra. Let's talk about what was happening when we left off. You had joined an expedition to Ilium. Ilium is a forbidden world out in the Umbra. It was once a powerful Vergence. Many thousands of years ago, there was a vast interdimensional war in which the other Vergences fought with Ilium. It was a long, brutal, devastating war. Ilium was destroyed, its obelisk was broken, and its people left extinct, and a giant barrier was placed around it, and it was made forbidden to go there. That was the case until recently, when a strange resonance started coming from Ilium and spreading across the Vergence and causing a disharmony across the multiverse. And as a result, the expedition you have joined, you've been invited to be part of, is traveling to Ilium uh, and is going to be able, you think, to enter Ilium because it the leader of the expedition, an NPC named Kyneth, who is the Duchess of Tresol from the Vergence of Agoros, um, has a key. This was made when the barrier was first created and will allow her to enter, to bring the expedition into Ilium. You had some interesting political maneuvering and then headed off through the Umbra. You've been traveling actually for nearly 2 weeks from world to world. You started out on a steam train, but eventually had to exit that because the worlds you were traveling to don't allow trains to work, and you've been traveling on creatures. Um, you found that something was affecting the expedition. That some of the NPCs were disappearing. Some of the servants and soldiers were just not on the train anymore. People weren't seeing what was going on, and you concocted a clever plan to have the three of you act as bait to, to travel forward through the Umbra and see if you could draw out some kind of reaction. Does that sound correct as far as everybody else's recollection?
Other than maybe it being a clever plan, I know all my clever plans seem to involve putting myself into danger.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah, that is the hallmark. That's truly the hallmark.
don't worry, I have an idea. We're
All your
going to
plans are clever.
dangle ourselves out there and then just invite them to attack us.
Yeah, it can't go wrong.
Speaking of which,
So before we talk about the exact situation we had ended in, we had sort of ended in a cliffhanger. How about you find folks introduce yourselves and the characters that you are playing? If it's okay, I'll go. So I'm David. I'm the game master. I'm also the designer of Vergence. Um, it's available on itch.io. But let's do a quick intro for everybody. I'm going to go in order around the screen. So Travis, why don't you introduce yourself and Hawthorne?
yep. So I'm Travis. I'm a light game designer as well, but mostly just around here helping playtest, enjoying a game, and helping with this adventure in general. And I am currently playing the character Hawthorne, who is a storm knight of the Maelstrom. Probably not a proper knight so much as like just a militant kind of order within the Maelstrom. I imagine that the group that Hawthorne is a part of specifically is probably more of a like scouting or reconnaissance type military group. Um, and yeah, she excels at ranged weapons of any variety, doing improbable or possibly impossible things with them. And yeah, uh, manifesting the storm, hopefully. Um,
Cool. What would be if one were to meet Hawthorne? What would be the first thing one would kind of note or remark
um, I think Hawthorne is probably not too um, ostentatious or like jarring to look at. I think any of the characters that are Bloodline probably exude main character energy throughout the Umbra. But besides that feeling of like this is an important person, she might not like stand out all that much. Um, she does have a incredible vocal range, which ranges both in like pitch and tone, but also volume and like all kinds of things. The ability to basically being from the Maelstrom, having the ability to kind of like innately be a part of the wind and the air. It's not just a vocal thing, I think, when it comes from Hawthorne, but rather kind of this magical essence of controlling the air, which is kind of how sound is made, anyways. So she can manipulate that very well.
on? And that's that to some degree that's normal in bloodline characters from the Maelstrom because you've attuned to the eye of the storm. The air fills your lungs. When you use your power, wind is stirred up around you. It is all about the storm. Okay, I'm going to go clockwise. So, Kirsten, why don't you tell us about Mika? That's the correct pronunciation?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
I landed on Mika.
Yeah, I think
So
I'm on that.
yeah, so Mika is a small blonde with sparkly gray blue eyes. She was originally a character that was lost, and what that means is that she was not raised as part of a royal family or part of a bloodline, and did not realize that she was part of a powered set, but always had tremendously, amazingly good luck, and some just things always seem to work out for her. She has since been discovered and brought back to her core kingdom, which is in Agarose, and is now traveling with this group that includes her half sister, the Duchess Kyneth, and she is she's being helpful because, of course, she wants to support her sister, and there's nothing going on that would be in any way, you know, but negative or manipulative or political, because that's not the kind of person she is.
It's all about family.
It's all about family.
Yes, there's no politics involved. This is not a
All
game.
about family and
This is not a game that has anything to do with family politics or machinations, anything like that.
No, and she's just happy to help.
Yes. Okay, Jared, how about you tell us a little bit about Titus?
Of course. So I will be playing. Or hello everyone. I'm Jared. I'll be playing Titus Maximus Damocles with a very long list of titles: Anathema to the Old Gods, Flame Against the Everfrost, The Blade of the Umbra. I'd like to make more
To be
as
everything.
time goes by. Titus, while Mika is a former lost character who was discovered and pledged to a bloodline, Titus is what is referred to as lost currently, as in he's not associated with any of the major bloodlines. He's just someone that happened to be powered and start making a name for himself across the Umbra. He is a massive, massive unit of a gentleman. I think 2 meters tall, so like 6'7", 6'8".
Big wall of meat.
Just wall of meat, stupidly square jaw. I've described him as looking like Giga Chad, for those familiar with the meme. So kind of statuesque, almost inhumanly perfect when it comes to body proportions and chiseled muscle. And he wears very little clothing except when absolutely required. So think pleated Romanesque type skirts and maybe sandals occasionally, maybe. Because wearing armor is for people that are
Sandals
afraid
are
of
for the
being
weak.
hit. Yeah.
Okay, very cool. All right, so let's talk about where we had left off because you had come up with a clever plan, and we had rolled an engagement roll, which in Vergence it uses the Forged in the Dark basic game system. And in this game, when you are planning things, you can skip all of the planning that your characters are doing and jump right into the action, just as you might see in an action movie. And then the players can always flash back to any prior time to demonstrate that they have thought of and planned for what's happening. So the assumption is that these are highly experienced characters. They're very smart. They are beyond human capacity in most ways, and so we joked earlier, but the plan is always assumed to be a smart one. So you did come up with a clever plan. It might not go well, but it's not because you did anything that doesn't make sense because you're assumed to be strategically competent people. So what had happened, if I recall correctly, you can counter what I say here. I did not go back and look at the video. I probably should have looked at the last 10 minutes of the video that we do have posted on YouTube. But who cares, right? But Mika had traveled forward, and you were in a world that is rather dark and desolate. It has a dark sky filled with stars, but they are large and dim, so they're not tiny little pinpoints like they are from our world. They are clear disks, but they are not as bright as the stars that we can see. So you've got about as much light as you would have on a starlit night here on Earth, and the stars in the sky are formed into a big whirling galaxy-like thing. The land is kind of rolling hills covered in thorny scrub brush, which uh, Titus and Hawthorne have had to notice, but for some reason, Mika can just walk along and no thorn has ever touched her. But she is just incredibly lucky. Right? So you don't even have to pay attention. The thorns just seem to, they want to get out of your way because it would be impolite to stab you. But you were deliberately kind of acting as the bait, and you had traveled forward ahead of your companions, and all of you are well ahead of the expedition. It is worlds behind. They're sort of camped out behind you. And as we ended the game, you saw out in sort of around you several sets of eyes. And each set of eyes is not like a pair of eyes, it's sort of a little constellation of glowing eyes that you can see. Now, I have a question for Mika. So you have a special ability called subtlety. And so so subtlety means that you can hide your power. That when you use powered abilities, you can make it so that they're not noticeable. That when people are looking for you, you're less likely to be seen using the power. That kind of thing. Do you think of that as a thing that's basically on by default unless you concentrate on having it not be there, or something that's there when you want it to be, but the rest of the time it's not really there?
No. So what what happened with her is because she has subtlety and also tangential convenience,
Mm-hmm.
which is the sort of super luck power.
Mm-hmm.
Those before she moved to Agaros and did the trials, and for those watching for the first time, that means that you essentially throw yourself into the center of power. It destroys you. You are reformed as a fully powered being. So she was like half powered
Mm-hmm.
when she was lost, but it was on by default, and she sort of
Mm-hmm.
because the power, by the way, for those from Agaros, is your eyes and your hands glow when you're doing stuff, and that would have made her basically in most of the places she traveled be identified as a witch or something and gotten in trouble. So that was always just on by default as like her system knew. When she learned about the powers and she realized what these were, um, she doubled down on that and, in fact, has leaned into the subtlety of it to the point where what she's working on is trying to be able to work the power around powered people and have them not know.
Okay. All right. So that's helpful to know in the context here. So you see these, several groups of eyes, and you get the sense of sort of large, sort of canine creatures out in the darkness moving toward you. You can
Lovely. I haven't had a dog in ages.
them sniffing
Awesome.
you, but then they all kind of look past you and behind you like they are focused on something else. Um, and then suddenly they move sort of around you and past you. Are you doing anything in response to that, or are you just letting that happen?
I turn in place. She's actually very graceful, so she does a little pivot step on the ball of her feet and just look at where they're going.
Okay.
One of the things that Mika has learned in her several hundred years is that um, reacting to things with fear gets you in more trouble. So even if you think you're in trouble, the best thing to do is to do the cat landing on its feet.
Mm-hmm.
I meant to do that reaction. So that's her default.
Right.
And that's
Cool.
what she's doing now.
But you're just, being aware of them. So
Yep.
you get
Just turning and kind of looking like, can I help you?
You know that your friends are behind you, and they seem to be going past you, and they look like they are headed toward them, and you get a sense of very large animal bodies moving past you in the darkness.
So Mika has a skill that I don't, which is the ability to go and whistle,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
which I cannot do to save my life. So, Jared, I'd have to have you do that for me. I suspect you can do it. But she basically goes, "Don't do not attack them. They are not a problem." And she starts chastising the giant dog beast.
Oh man, we're gonna hear that and be like, "Oh, the monsters aren't a problem then."
Yeah.
Oh, we want them.
Yeah,
to
that's
attack.
true.
That's the entire way.
Yeah.
I've been
It's like,
waiting.
those are my friends. Leave my friends alone.
Uh-huh. So
And she starts striding forward.
Where are Hawthorne and Titus? Are you together? Are you in some kind of?
I think we talked about setting up a small camp. I imagine at least Titus is by the fire, tending to the fire with a stick. Maybe arranging some rock nearby as potential, weapon or heavy things to swing at something.
Some rocks. Here's my collection of rocks.
I mean,
This is my pet rock. Its name is George.
Yeah. Well, yeah, a small rock, throw a bigger rock to smash.
I think Hawthorne is probably distanced. We were anticipating trouble or trying to find it. So as long as there is a position Hawthorne could be in that is not completely out of line of sight, Hawthorne would be distanced with the intent to use her range skills.
Okay. So you're sort of in an Overwatch / sniping position.
Yeah.
Like up on a hill.
Yeah, if there's like a low rise or cliff or something like that.
She's playing Hawkeye right now.
totally findable. So that's fine. So Hawthorne, you hear a whistle that sounds like Mika off in the distance. You know that she had headed out into the night. And you see several creatures, or the kind of general outlines of several creatures. And you, they are sort of headed in the general direction of you and Titus. As you become aware of them, you you become immediately aware of their watching you, their awareness of you, like they have like zoop. Suddenly, they are attending to you.
Sure.
And I'm going to. So you and you feel a sort of wobbly intensity around that, as if some kind of psychic force is being projected at you, and you feel disoriented. That's a condition being imposed on you. You could resist that if you wish, but for the moment, if unless you decide to do that, there's a place on your character sheet at the bottom left to mark consequences and conditions. So it's not harm, it's not long term, but it is disorientation. Do you want to try to resist that?
No, I think it's fine.
Okay.
Maybe this like wave of unease comes over me, and I kind of like have to lean away from whatever type of weapon I have right now that I was kind of like attempting to aim and collect myself a little bit. Is there a? It's been described in a way that sounds like a small pack, or
Yeah.
Do we get the sense? I mean, obviously, this is a strange sensation Hawthorne's receiving, but do we get the sense that this is eminently more dangerous than we had anticipated?
Probably so, because there aren't that many creatures that can, impose this kind of thing on you at a distance. That this seems like a psychic attack of some kind.
Okay.
So that inherently seems rather dangerous.
I will, while disoriented, um, I'm gonna call out to Titus, and I did end up taking the Storm Song ability.
Ooh.
Um,
Yeah, that's a cool one. I like that.
So as a default, if I ever say call out, it is a whisper that only that person can hear. And I'm just going to, call to Titus, like, ready your stones, or something along those lines, because I probably have seen you playing with these rocks.
Mm-hmm. All right. So just to describe what that power is, Storm Song. You are filled with song, but you can keep it inaudible when you want. You have the power to manipulate sound, creating various effects such as whispering in the ear of someone a mile away, emitting an ear-splitting boom, creating a zone of absolute silence, listening to a whispered conversation on the other side of a crowded room, or sensing in darkness using echolocation. So any kind of sound-oriented power is a thing you can use, and certainly for something as trivial as just whispering in somebody's ear at a distance, that's not something that requires a roll. So Titus, you suddenly hear, it's a little disorienting, it sounds like Hawthorne is right next to you and talking to you, even though clearly she is not.
Is this a power Titus is aware of, or I imagine actually we probably discussed or potentially know about, like warned each other or something, so he's not like.
Yeah, I think this is common enough. It's probably something where like you've heard Hawthorne that way before, where it's like too close of an origin and too quiet compared to where Hawthorne is standing. You know what I mean? Like even if we didn't outwardly discuss it. Like,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. So this is a little bit expected. Yeah, I think shadows, from the fire, kind of dancing across Titus's face. Huge grin starts to break out as he pulls out kind of a torch type from the fire and kind of selects a decent sized rock for the other hand and stands up slowly and turns to face where the dogs are coming from.
Sounds like fun. All right. So, Mika, you were trying to influence the dog's or the creature's behavior. I've described them as canine, but they're not dogs. Um, is that so? Uh, I'm assuming that's you essentially taking action to kind of try to influence them.
So that's probably persuade.
That's fine if you want to take an action roll using persuade. What exactly are you trying to accomplish?
Well, her default is that. Sorry, hold on a second. Her default is that everything is on her side once it understands her intentions.
Okay.
And so, therefore, she just, if they're about to do something foolish, it's because they don't understand that these are her friends and they're about to do something unnecessary. Mm-hmm. So she's, they're obviously, lovely beasts and perhaps want to scratch behind the ears or whatever those things are. They're probably ears. But, but she's just, sort of peremptory. No, don't do that. Come back here.
Okay.
I have kibble.
Okay, so you're trying to persuade them to stand down, essentially. So the way this game works, you can, the basic resolution system is that when you decide to do something that is potentially risky or troublesome, we can decide that that's an action roll. In many cases, when you're doing things, you just do them because you're very competent people, but when there's something difficult for you, that becomes an action roll. You say what you are trying to do and how you're trying to do it, and then each character has a set of action ratings. There are 9 action ratings, and you say which of those ratings is the one that best describes what you're trying to do or how you're trying to accomplish your goal. In this case, Mika is using Persuade, which is one of those abilities. The GM then sets the stakes for that based on the situation. The stakes are comprised of two characteristics, which are basically risk and reward. The game refers to those as, oh my god, my brain is not working.
Position and effect.
Position and effect. I don't know how I managed
Thank
to
you,
miss
Jared.
that very basic thing. Position and effect. So position is how risky the situation is, and effect is how much you're going to be able to accomplish with this role. Because we had already established that the situation is risky, there are 3 levels of position: controlled, risky, and desperate. You're not desperate, but it is risky. That means that the starting situation doesn't stay the whole way through the whole event, but the starting situation is that things are risky. So I'm going to say that they are risky for this role. And then the effect, I'm going to say, is limited because these creatures are not easily persuaded. So if you were to get a success on that roll, with limited effect, you'd probably get one of them to hesitate, but you're not going to get the whole pack to come over and come get scritches. Now you can manipulate that. There are a couple of ways to change the stakes of the situation. So if you need more effect, which you might well want to do if you've got starting with limited effect, then you can do a couple of things. You can push for effect. That means you spend 2 of your stress. You have a resource called stress. You have 9 stress to start out with. And you can use that to enhance rolls and do lots of other things. So pushing means that you spend 2 stress and get a bonus. You can push for an extra die if you want a better chance of success, or you can push for effect if you want to just get more done. And that would increase the effect level to standard, which would get at least one crit creature, kind of out of engagement, at least for now. You can also trade position for effect. So you could put yourself at more risk in order to get more effect. So you could switch the situation to desperate and then increase your effect by one level if you want to. But that means that if things
Jared's
go
going, yes,
badly
that
on
would
your
be good.
roll, it's worse for you. The consequences are worse. In other situations, if you want to be super careful, you can take less risk for less effect. But in this case, you're already starting at limited, so that would bring you down to 0, which would do nothing, which there's no point. You're deciding to do that because you get nothing out of it. So, what would you like to do about that? Do you want to push? Do you want to trade
this is
positions
where.
for effect? Do you want to go with limited?
Well, actually, I'm going to do a combination of things.
Okay. Cool.
And one of them is going to be a devil's bargain.
Okay. You can take a devil's bargain for an extra die, but not for extra effect.
Yeah, I'm going to take a devil's bargain for an extra die, and then I'm going to push for change of effect.
Okay, so that brings you up to standard effect, and then so you change the stakes by pushing for effect, and then you can let's talk about the dice system. So you start with a number of dice equal to the rating in the ability you're using. In this case, you have 1 dot in that ability, so you start with 1 6-sided die. And then you can get more dice. You could push for an extra die, as we already said. You can get assistance from someone else, which would give you an extra die. You can also accept a devil's bargain. This is an extra negative, troublesome thing that will happen regardless of how the dice turn out. And that's negotiated between the player and the GM. The player can always refuse to accept an offered devil's bargain. Anybody in the group can suggest a possible devil's bargain. So do you have a suggestion, or are you just kind of fishing for what that devil's bargain might be?
Fishing for what it could be.
Okay.
I'm open to the group suggestions since I'm normally the least likely to use devil's bargains, so I thought I would lean in.
You thought you'd lean into it a little bit? Okay,
yeah.
Cool.
I have an idea.
Sure.
To get their attention, Mika will have to or basically for the devil's bargain, Mika will have to use a non-subtle version of the power. So she will flare up or something like that to grab attention. That's one idea for a devil's bargain that I had. I don't know if that'll fit better on devil's bargain or trading position and effect.
So I think we could make that a negative by saying that because I lean into the power and turn it on, my subtlety actually becomes harder to use for a small period.
For a little while, yeah. Not an extended period, but during this kind of action scene, you flare a bit. I'm okay
so
with
maybe
that.
around these creatures, I have a little more trouble doing subtlety then,
right?
Which is something she leans on heavily.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'm good with that.
That makes sense.
All right, that would give you 2 dice to roll.
That's 2 dice, and I don't remember actually. Can I get an assist for an extra die or no? Because I'm doing other things.
You can't both push for dice and take a devil's bargain. You can only get 1 die from that. But you can get an additional die by getting an assist from someone. So that means that another player says what they're doing to help you, and they could do that via a flashback if we work that out. But how they are helping you, it has to be rationalizable. And then they spend 1 stress, and you get an extra die.
I'm not sure how Titus would be assisting in this situation.
Hawthorne, can you?
I could possibly, maybe I'm not taking a shot to injure or get an actual shot in, but maybe if I had shot like into the pack and one of the beast like pauses, it would be easier for Mika to like catch their attention or something, or it might like turn.
That could work.
So
That's fine.
you're kind of doing a warning shot.
Yeah, effectively.
A distraction shot, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All
so
right.
You do
That
that
makes sense.
would do 3 dice to roll. Here,
All right.
standard effect and risky position.
All right. So
We're using a dice roller in our system here.
yep. Okay. Here we go. Hey, huzzah! 6.
Yep.
Ah, okay.
So so this is obviously a dice pool system. We take only the highest die is the one that we're interested in. You roll the 6, which is a full success. That means you were in a risky position, but because you rolled a 6, the position doesn't matter. You got away with it clean, and therefore you just succeed with what you were trying to do. So as you're going forward, and as you're trying to connect with these creatures, a shot rings out. A creature kind of looks over at that, and then you see that it turns towards you and starts moving toward you, and you realize that you are emanating power the way that you're not used to doing, and you are radiating heat because that's what the power looks like when somebody from Agoros uses the power, because you've attuned to the orb of Agoros, which is sort of like a small floating sun in the middle of the caverns.
Light.
Radiate heat and light, so you're glowing a little bit. Normally, you're able to control this really well, and this creature is looking right at you, and it's got this kind of weird constellation of myriad glowing eyes, which are a little bit hypnotic, and you realize that it's paying attention to you because you're radiating the power.
Okay. So I'm gonna lean into it,
Okay.
and I'm going to push the glow, and then say, "Come here."
Okay. So that sounds. Correct me if I'm wrong. So just to be clear, there's no formal actions order in this game. Where there's not initiative rolls or anything like that. We're just kind of following the story, and it's partially the GM's job to move the spotlight around from person to person, and not let anyone control that. But it's okay for a player to make a couple of actions in a row before moving to someone else. So so we'll do that for now. Let's. It sounds like. So what are you trying to accomplish at this point? Are you trying to persuade it to kind of come over to you and stand down?
Mm-hmm. I want
Okay.
to come over here and sit down.
Okay. So that's another persuade action, or are you switching to a different action rating?
It's also command, but that might not work.
I mean, if you're
Yeah, I don't really have command. I'm not really thinking of that as an order as much as just that's my response.
right,
If that
so
makes sense.
you're still being friendly with the creature. You're just being.
Oh, I'm
friendly.
still being friendly, but it just if that's what they're noticing, I'm like, come over here.
Okay.
Excuse me.
All right. So let's say that that's another roll that is still risky. I'm going to call it risky standard, and if you succeed, it will essentially come over and be neutral, at least toward you.
All right. So, but this is now essentially one die.
So yeah, it's another roll. So you're starting with one die.
All right, I'm not gonna.
Then you could push for an extra die. other things.
No. I did that on the first one. On the second one, I'm just going to go ahead and roll the power straight.
Okay, so that's one die roll, risky
So it's
standard.
one die. Yep.
What's the worst that can happen?
So, what's the worst can happen? I can be eaten, and that would be very annoying. Unlike you, I actually don't die all the time. Ah,
And you roll
and
3, which is
she overshoots.
Yep.
Yes.
So
Yep.
so in this game, you can get a success, a mixed success, which means that you get what you want, but there's some kind of negative consequence, or you can fail, which means you don't achieve what you want, and also there's a consequence. The severity of the consequence is determined by the position. In this case, the position was risky. So it wasn't controlled. It's not a little mild consequence, but it wasn't desperate. It's not a horrifically bad consequence. It's somewhere in the middle. And I'm going to say that what happens is that you look at this thing, you start talking to it, and you start falling into its eyes. That those eyes are hypnotic, and that what you find is that it's not coming to you. You're coming to it. And I'm
Spooky.
going to say that you have a condition. We'll call it enthralled. You can resist that. So let's talk about the
I'm going to
resist.
resist that.
Yeah. So let's talk about the resistance system in this game. So
I'm going to resist that.
any consequence that you don't like, you can exert control over. You can say, I'm resisting that. And your resistance automatically is successful. We don't roll to see if that works or not. What we roll for is how much stress it costs you, because it might cost a little bit or a lot of stress. It might even cost 0 stress. And so, you can get horrible consequences imposed on you. As long as you have stress, you can resist that. Obviously, you can't, if you're doing a lot of rolls, you can't resist every single consequence, because once you run out of stress, you can't do that anymore. But you have a little bit of stress here. I'm going to say there are 3 attributes that you can resist with. The GM decides which of those make sense in this circumstance. Insight, prowess, and resolve. Resolve is used for consequences of mental strain or willpower. That seems to fit pretty well here. And that just decides how many dice you roll. There are 3 of your actions under resolve, and we look at the number that you have at least 1 dot in. In this case, you're making a 2 die resist roll, because you have dots in both persuade and warp under resolve. So you can make a resistance roll. Actually, roll that as a fortune roll, because we're using this differently than the dice bot is programmed for. And again, we look at the highest die, and a 1 to 3.
So fortune and 2, right?
Yeah, 2 dice.
Okay.
A 1 to 3 will cost you 4.
Yes.
A 4 or 5 will cost you 2. A full success, which you rolled. You rolled a 6, costs you 0, so it didn't cost you any dice, any stress in this case.
Which is how things should be.
Yes, obviously so. So you didn't succeed with that. You feel the creature's mind, its weird set of eyes staring at you. It starts to push into your mind, and then you shake that off. Right?
So this is very much Reese Witherspoon from Legally Blonde kind of personality body type. So she shakes it off, and she puts her hands on her hips and stamps 1 foot.
So essentially what has happened is that you tried to exert control over it, and it tried to exert control over you, and you're at an impasse.
Well, we're not at an impasse. It recognized it made a mistake.
Well, it hasn't quite recognized that yet.
Out of curiosity,
I don't think you understand me as well as I do.
Does this thing show signs of has this shown any signs of intelligence, or more just kind of like hunter, kind of like trying to draw in?
Hard to tell at this point.
Fair enough.
Don't start yawning. Oh my god.
I didn't.
Yep.
Titus,
Nope. Nope.
you have made yourself aware of what's going on, made yourself ready by the fire, and there are a couple of creatures coming out of the darkness toward you, but they do not charge in at you. They halt well out of easy striking range, and you can just feel their minds boring into yours. You can see their eyes hypnotically imposing themselves on you, and we're going to call that also a condition. So in this game, the GM can say that you have experienced a consequence, which you can then choose to resist. So consequences can happen from action rolls, but also just from the fictional situation that's occurring. So uh, so that's what happens to you. You are so the condition is that you are stopped in your tracks.
I would like to resist that.
That is totally fine. I'm going to call that also a resolve roll. And just like Mika, you have 2 dots in resolve.
Easy. So I'll click make that roll, and then let's try that. Not great, but Mika took all the good rolls.
So that Mika gets all the good luck, right? So that costs you 4 stress, and you only have 9, so that's a big hit.
That's a heavy hit, but that's okay.
What does that feel like to you? That it costs you that much stress.
I think there's kind of a moment where I think even Titus has to drop the rock as he kind of feels like that kind of thing, and I think maybe there's like a nearby vine because we imagine kind of that briar patch, and he grabs one of those and he wraps the thorns around like one of his hands or something, so he kind of has an impromptu spiked knuckles and grips his fist around it. So there's a small trail of blood coming down, and that allows him a focus point to kind of forces his body to move and go past.
So this is hard for you.
Okay? Yes.
But you make that happen, and you're able to take action. They do not stop you in your tracks. What are you doing?
I'm going to make the situation better or worse. So
yes,
is there wind?
Yes, and
is there wind?
That's an interesting question.
When Titus starts lighting the briar patches on fire, I just want to know how far this is going to spread.
All right, well, let's make a fortune roll to see about that. Okay. So in this game, when the GM wants to have a random, is asked a question essentially and wants things to be random, you can just make a fortune roll to see how that turns out. I'm just going to roll 1 die. Sometimes you can use a trait from an NPC or a PC for a fortune roll. But in this case, there's not really a trait to roll. I'm just going to roll 1 die. And the higher the roll, the more the wind is picking up.
Okay. The silence.
Right, and we rolled a 5. So there's moderate wind. It's not still, but it's not blowing all over the place. It's not like a Kurosawa movie.
Do you want it to spread?
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, because my idea is Titus is going to use the impromptu torch he took out of the fire and basically start lighting the briar patches so that the creatures are forced to either move away or move closer. He's basically forced them into a position where he will have either a chance to attack them and they have to enter his threatened area essentially, or they have to leave.
Okay. So you're using a torch and you're just going around lighting up bushes wherever you can find them. Okay. All right. That is cool. So that's what you're trying to achieve.
Yes.
There are different abilities that could fit that. Maybe contrive.
That's what I was thinking. Is this is contrived, kind of even like a setup action for a future attack, kind of.
Yeah, this is this is sort of making this kind of battlefield preparation for you.
Yeah.
So contrive is defined as implementing a clever strategy. That seems like what you're doing here. I'm going to call this, we'll call this, again, risky standard. That's the default rules. There are going to be lots of situations that are risky standard. So it's a bit risky because these creatures could do something bad to you, or the fire could even get out of control in ways that you don't like. And standard means that you will establish an improved tactical situation for yourself.
Perfect. Is there a good devil's bargain for this one?
Let's see. Well, an easy one would be that the fire burns you for level 1 harm. That's a little bit of a boring one, but could work.
Yeah. I have
Or
0 harm so far, and that's weird for my characters.
yeah. And you do have an ability that reduces the effects of being hurt. So harm is your sort of go-to. Sure, I'll get hurt, no problem, thing. But what I think I like better is I'm going to establish. It would be that I would establish a clock. In this game, you can establish clocks to
As Jared's
to
eyes
various
light
people,
up.
in this case, to show impending threat, and that I'd set a clock to say essentially more are coming.
I like it. Yes.
Okay, and that would and so I'll create a clock and a four segment clock and tick 1 segment on there.
Perfect.
Okay.
I'm down. So that's 2 dice.
Yep. Let me create a clock in the clock channel to track that. 4 segments.
All right. I have 2 dice. Traditionally, now is the time I'd figure out how to go for desperate greater, but I'll save that for a more cinematic moment.
Okay, I have a clock. So you have 1 dot in contrive. Do you want to do anything to get? So you said you're not trying to get more effect.
Not yet.
Okay, that's fine. Are you doing anything to get more dice, or are you just rolling 1 die?
Nothing bad ever happens with 2 dice, so I think I'm just gonna go with 2 dice.
No.
Well, you have 1 dot. So you have 1 dot in contrive plus 1 die for the devil's bargain.
Perfect.
Okay,
Let's do it there.
What could possibly go wrong?
Hey, it all went exactly as I planned. Well, not quite. I rolled a 5 and a 3, so I got the 5, which would be a success with extra fun, as I like to call it.
The best kind of success. So that's a
Success with band-aids. Great.
That's a mixed success. So you do get what you want, which is that you've established a
Raging Inferno.
improved situation. You said you wanted to either have the creatures forced closer to you or further away.
Yes.
Which do you want? Because you rolled a success, I'm going to ask which would you prefer?
He'd prefer them closer because he doesn't.
All right, and that's what happens. So the fire starts up. They appear to not like the fire, and they're moving in closer to you, where you are more able to engage them directly. But it's a risky consequence. And I'm going to say that you are tightly surrounded. So not only did they move in, but there are 3 of them, and they're right around you, penning you in, and no matter which direction you go, one of them could come in from behind if they wanted.
You're giving him his birthday present early, I see.
Yeah, well,
that's just a success with more success in my mind.
Yeah, it's getting into some trouble, and we lean into that a bit. All right, Travis, what is Hawthorne doing as this is all happening? happening. You're a little disoriented, so I'm thinking of it as it's taking you a moment to shake things off. You did fire that warning shot. You're in an overwatched position, so you're seeing this, Titus lighting up fire and going in with these creatures. He's not actually, in melee with them yet. What are you trying to do now?
So there's. I wanted to just ask. I mean, I assume they have like mean-looking jaws and teeth, but the focus of every description's been about their eyes. I just wanted to make sure they look like they're the kind of animal that's trying to tear us apart.
They do have big jaws. They also are covered in sort of small, spiky protrusions. So sort of, well, kind of like porcupine quills, but not as dense.
Sure.
Ooh.
And the other thing,
probably wouldn't want to be wrestling with one of them.
Oh,
the other thing I was going to ask is,
I
Titus
myself would not want to wrestle with one.
Titus put himself in a position with them surrounding, or like he tried to manipulate where they were at.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask, because there was no description of any peeling off to come towards me. They noticed that I was here, but none of them are directly after me, I assume.
Well, those three are right there with Titus. You notice a couple, and there's another one with Mika,
mm-hmm.
and you've been trying to track these. It's dark. You get the sense that there are a couple more out there.
Okay. Then I definitely think Hawthorne would be focused on trying to like track or find the ones elsewhere, assuming that they're coming towards me. So, I mean, kind of like scanning the ground below, or
mm-hmm.
like whatever I would assume is the easiest path up here, trying to find
mm-hmm.
how close they are.
Cool. So, are you kind of trying to establish the best kind of tactical position, or are you just trying to know exactly what's going on here?
I mean, yeah, maybe getting a tactical position. Like if they're already getting really close to me, then I need to be probably falling back, getting myself into an area where I'm not going to be immediately jumped by these things.
Sure. All right. So, in terms of actions, would that be study or something else?
Yeah, study probably makes sense.
Okay. All right. So, study is defined as acquiring and synthesizing critical information. Sounds like what's going on here. Because you're a little ways back, I'm going to call this a controlled roll for the moment. And standard effect, standard effect means that you'll have a very clear understanding of the tactical situation.
And from disoriented, is that applying any penalties I need to know of?
Yep, that's a good question. Yeah, thank you for reminding me of that. My mistake. I'm going to say that because you are disoriented, that's going to be -1 effect. So that'll be limited effect. So you'll have some idea of what's going on, but you won't be sure whether there's something you've missed.
Sure. And is there a devil's bargain that might present itself?
Absolutely, there is. Well, I could take one more segment on the more are coming clock.
Sure, that's fine.
Okay.
I'll go for effect, I think, rather than a die. Wait, is that devil's bargain?
Yeah, you can take a devil's bargain for an extra die.
Okay, only for the die. Never mind.
Mm-hmm.
So I will take the die then.
Okay. You have 1 dot in study, so that brings you up to 2 dice.
Right. And I will push position for effect then, so it'll be risky standard instead of controlled limited.
Oh yeah, okay. So how are you taking more risk then?
It's probably along the lines of just they've gotten closer to me than I like. The disorientation has made me respond slower than I would want, um, and just the danger is probably closer than I,
Okay.
unless I roll really well. Um,
Yeah. We'll see.
but if somebody can grab that 2 dice roll for me.
Oh, right, right.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm doing it, right?
That's fine.
Okay, cool. Just want to make sure we don't have multiple dice going. 2 dice, right?
Yep.
Cool.
Oh, and a 6.
Awesome.
Okay. So you have a very clear tactical, you manage to shake off the disorientation for a moment, look around. You have excellent vision in this situation. Uh, what kind of, you had described taking a shot. What kind of weapon are you using? Just out of curiosity.
I imagine it's not anything spectacular at the moment. It's probably like a. I mean, we just came out of Agaros, so I imagine it's some sort of like very simple, like rifle, almost like a musket or like a long rifle kind of deal.
And maybe the projectiles are that the explosion actually is actually an explosion of empowered steam. So each cartridge has empowered steam, which is used to project the projectile rather than gunpowder.
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right, so you have a clear sense of the environment. You know exactly that there are 2 others on opposite, outside that are kind of circling around, sort of ending up. They're going to end up toward you.